Hello, Crossroads. It's Monday, and I want to show you a picture. Take a look at this picture. Does that look familiar? It does to a number of you. Some of you have actually been there, and so you know exactly what it is. There's others of you who are kind of searching and remember, oh yeah, what's that thing called? And it was popularized over 40 years ago. There was a movie that came out. For sci-fi movies, I didn't think it was the greatest of a sci-fi movie. But in 1977, Encounters of the Third Kind. And that's what introduced me to what you saw in that picture. That's called the Devil's Tower. It's just a really unusual mountain of rock. It's just kind of standing all by itself and goes straight up with all these grooves in the side and a flat top. And there's Indian stories told about all those grooves are from bear claws, and a couple of children that were up on top of it, and they were trying to get to those children, and there's all kinds of legends and stuff associated with the Devil's Tower. Well, anyway, I was there last Thursday. I was on a motorcycle ride, took a few days, and decided to go up and see Mount Rushmore and see a bunch of buffalo in Custer Park and up there in the Black Hills. And then early on Thursday morning last week, I got up before anyone else in the motel that I was staying at was up, and loaded everything up on my motorcycle, and I headed out. I didn't take the interstate. I just took 2-lane roads, which I enjoy doing, more scenery to enjoy. And boy, there's some really good riding roads up there. And so here I was. It took over an hour and 10, 15 minutes maybe, to get over there. And as I was approaching it, I could see it, but I was still going around curves and up and down hills and, and catching a view of it. And I knew I was getting very close. And as I was coming to basically what ended up being that last hill, before I would be able to turn right into the parking lot there for the check-in and the gift shop and all of that kind of stuff that they have. This car come flying over the top of the hill, and the guy was waving this flag, and so I stopped the motorcycle right there in the road, and so did this woman in her car, and the guy started shouting out, and he said, right over that hill, there's some cattle. He was giving us a heads up so we didn't run into some cows. And I was like, okay, I said, thanks. And I went ahead and let the clutch out, and I took off. It's not like I'd never encountered cattle, on one of my rides before. There have been at least 2 or 3 times over the years. One time on Highway 36, there was about 15 cattle. I popped over this hill going at full speed, 65, 70 miles an hour on Highway 36, and all of a sudden, whoa, it slowed down real quick, and apparently the gate had been left open or a fence broke or something or other, and those cattle got loose. Well, that's kind of what I was expecting this time, except now I had the heads up, and so I knew I'd be alert to it. But as I popped over that hill, little did I realize what it was I was actually going to see. I was going to see a whole herd of cattle. I mean, I'm talking a big herd. There were hundreds of cattle. There had to have been somewhere in the neighborhood of now I'm a preacher, right? So this is a preacher's count, but there had to have been somewhere around 300 or 400 head of cattle, and they were all coming toward me. I mean, they filled the ditch over on this side, they filled the ditch over on that side, and across the road. I mean, they were just packed, just row upon row, layer upon layer, going way back there. And a few calves were out front kind of leading the way. And it was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. So I pulled over the edge of the road real quick, cut the motor because I didn't want, the pipes on the bike to be spooking any of these cattle. And so I just sat there and just to enjoy the sight. And cowboy come riding up to me on his horse, had the cowboy hat and everything, and I mean, there were 2 or 3 of those guys on horses that were whistling and barking out commands, and there was a collie running around, kind of containing the cattle, and there were like 3 different ATVs that were flying around, to herd all of these cattle. Anyway, this guy come riding up to me and said, "You need to move your bike further back. We don't want to distract the cattle because that gate right over there is where we're wanting to go in." And I said, "Sure enough." So I turned around and kind of went back a little bit, but then turned back around so I'd be able to watch the whole site and watch the dog do his work and hear all the whistling and the hooting and the hollering. And one mother was riding her ATV, and she was screaming and yelling at the cattle, and right in her lap, her little boy, as she's riding this ATV, he couldn't have been 2 years old. And so, I mean, he was getting indoctrinated into that type of life. I mean, it was obvious I was in Wyoming, when all of that happened. And it was enjoyable. So I just sat there for a few minutes on my motorcycle and watched it all. And then once most of them had gone in or the rest of them were kind of in the ditch to my left, I saw an opportunity to go ahead and start the bike up and head on and pop up. Well, actually, I was over the hill just to go down the road a little ways and get into the parking lot. But then this is the funny part about it, is that as I was doing that, moving along, all of a sudden, something I hadn't even thought about, all the evidence of the fact that these cattle had been on the road was there. These guys weren't just being removed from one field across the road to the other field. These cattle were being moved from a field a couple of miles down the way. And these cowboys all herded them all this distance and then to put them into this field. And so those cattle had been on that highway for at least a couple of miles. And I was just kind of riding slow and dodging and trying to balance the bike so as not to run over, any of the evidence that the cattle had left behind. So the last thing I wanted was a bunch of that inside the fenders of the motorcycle or splashed up on my boots. And I did that for a couple of miles until I got to the end of it, which was also the entrance into the Devil's Tower. So it was really comical. I had gone to be inspired by seeing the Devil's Tower, which I had seen that before. I'd gone there previous time a number of years ago, but I wanted to refresh my memory and see it again. And I was thinking that was going to be the highlight that Thursday, but instead the highlight ended up being all of these cattle. But here it is again. Look at the Devil's Tower. Okay, it's a pretty impressive thing, and that's a picture that I took. Now you might doubt me, you might think, well, you just pulled that off the web or something or other. Okay, well, let me give you a little more indication. I took the picture myself. Look at this picture. There you go. Now that picture is complete. It's a beautiful thing, right? And if you want your own copy of this to use as wallpaper on your computer, just send me an email. I'd be happy to send it. That's where I'm planning on putting it, is on my computer. So for the next year, I can enjoy and remember the highlights of last Thursday. All right, now let me just give you a devotional thought. And it's all being inspired by the Devil's Tower. Okay, there's a whole story about how it got its name, the Devil's Tower, and all of this. And I'm not going to go into all of that, but let me just say this. The devil's days are numbered. Okay? The devil's days are numbered. And he knows it. He's running out of time, and he knows it. Let me read it for you. It's in Revelation chapter 12. Verse 12 it says, "Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them." Okay, because that's an expression of celebration about how the devil and his angels were kicked out of heaven. Their attempt to usurp the throne, failed, and they were kicked out of heaven. So rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But get this, verse 12 goes on and says, "But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. And he is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. The devil's days are numbered, and he knows it. He's running out of time. You know, I don't think we hardly have an idea of what all the devil has been responsible for. You know, both during our lifetimes and previously, before we were ever born and lived here on earth. The devil's done a lot of havoc. He stands against and opposed to everything that God stands for. And I think there's probably going to come a time in glory that God's going to give us 2020 vision to be able to see, you know, our lives and to be able to see the devil's activity in a clearer way of what havoc he had wreaked on the world. But the reality of the matter is, his days are numbered. And there's going to come a time where he cannot do anything else. You know, there's a very real possibility you might right now be going through a rough stretch in your life. You might be going through a rough time. Maybe it's related to the coronavirus directly, or maybe it's kind of indirectly because it's job-wise. Maybe you've had to get by on lower income or whatever, and you're struggling financially. I mean, it could be any of a number of things. You might be going through a rough stretch right now in your life regarding your health right now. And you know, if it's any of those kinds of things or a combination of all of that, that might bring discouragement into your life, and that might cause you to feel down. And you know what? I mean, that happens to all of us to one degree or another, okay? And it's okay at times to feel discouraged and to feel down. But I want to impress this upon you, that when that kind of junk is going on in your life, don't allow it to cause you to feel defeated. No, because it's the devil that's defeated. If you're a follower of Christ, it's not you, and it's not me. We're on the winning side. We are more than victorious in Christ. We might go through times of discouragement and feeling down, but we're not defeated. We're not defeated. Romans chapter 16, verse 20 says, "The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet." Yeah, his days are numbered, and he knows it. Might we get encouragement from that as we face the day and as we approach tomorrow? Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you have a good week.